Yeah, sorry, yeah, my name's Richard. I actually work for an oil and gas exploration company, and in fact, that's all I've ever done in my entire career. So, you know, for a lot of the environmental work, we were probably seen as the bad boys. So I was a geologist flying around the world, desperately drilling holes, desperately trying to find oil and gas. The whole energy industry itself is changing its thing and it's going through a whole process of energy transition. There's more I can talk on that later, and you know, if this doesn't bore you to tears, I'll perhaps give you another talk at a later point of what's actually happened within the industry. But this is what's going to happen to the UK domestic customer. What are the plans that are in place between the energy industry and the government at the moment, right? So I'm going to run through these slides. Hopefully this will only take about 10 minutes, right? If it takes longer, please shout. Well, hopefully. Okay, before we go any further, the best thing to try and do is our current greenhouse gas emissions, right? In the UK, these are 2018 data. I couldn't find any 2019 data. You can see that it's divided, I think, but the most important thing is actually the slide on the right here, which shows the gas takes up 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions at the moment. So that is what is now being concentrated on very heavily to try and reduce us down to net zero within the UK. The UK has a target of net zero by 2050, and this is going to help release that target. Now, gas by its very nature is very variable in its demand. Electricity throughout the year in the domestic world is pretty standard, pretty stable. It doesn't vary too much. But gas obviously is seasonal and it goes up and down. So the reason why I want to look at that is gas is the one way we can do the biggest impact on it. To reduce CO2 emissions from gas, the way out is either we replace gas by electricity for domestic heating and domestic power, or we decarbonise the gas itself. And basically the government and the industry has decided that decarbonising the gas is far easier, and I'll explain why in a bit. You'll see these graphs from the National Grid. They're all public domain. You can go out and check on the National Grid one. But at the moment, if you look at it on the left here, you see that gas really is fantastic. Nearly 3/4 of our supply of domestic market is from gas. So by decarbonising gas will make a massive difference. National Grid always have two graphs, one for 2 degrees, which is to correspond with the Paris Accord. We're reducing that all for net zero. Net zero is the government's goal at the moment, is to go reduce net zero by 2050. In that, you'll see particularly that hydrogen is going to make a big difference in it. Before we go any further, I'm really sorry. I've tried to avoid putting this in there, but I need to tell you that there are 2 different sorts of hydrogen. There's a blue hydrogen and a green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is generated from methane, from natural gas, and we can use that right now, repurposing existing infrastructure. We can blend it with natural gas, and there's no impact at all, and it can be used for power generation. It's called blue hydrogen for some reason because it actually has impurities in it. I'm not sure why it's blue then. There's another hydrogen called green hydrogen, which is actually pure hydrogen. There's no impurities in it, and that can be used for transportation and for feedstock for the chemical industry. You need to know the difference between both, and I'll explain why later, because we're going to move through 2 phases, through blue hydrogen phase and then onto a green hydrogen phase. When we generate hydrogen at the moment, right, it's done by a thing called steam methane reforming. And I really try my best to avoid putting any chemical formulas in here or any processes in there. But virtually all hydrogen generated industrially this way is done through steam methane reforming. The problem with it is when you convert methane, which is essentially CH4, into H2, you do emit carbon. So you're emitting carbon dioxide. So the issue with that is we need to compress and transport that carbon dioxide that's in the thing. Now, I hate to be honest about it, but initially in hydrogen production, a lot of the carbon dioxide was just vented to the outside world. That's changing, thank God. When you produce hydrogen using this method, it takes you get 10 tons of CO2 for every 1 ton of hydrogen. So that just lets you know how much carbon we're generating on it. So we have to capture it. The concept is now is that it's obviously better to capture it at the point of production than to ship methane out to all the domestic places and everyone try and capture it locally. So we'll capture it, and hydrogen, obviously when it burns locally in domestic boilers, will only produce steam, water. It does have its own challenges, but there's quite a lot of synergy between what the oil and gas industry does now and the national grid with the transmission, the storage, and how it all works, right? There is a stage way we're going through blue hydrogen to green hydrogen to get to zero energy. And it's estimated that basically, because hydrogen is actually easier to transport and store compared to electricity, there should be 160 billion cost saving to the UK by using hydrogen rather than electrifying everything. This is another one I got from National Grid. It's not our entire electricity generation capacity and what we use in homes right now. This is what we're using in what they call zero carbon generation. And the most important thing is the National Grid themselves are believing that net zero NZ will have a lot of hydrogen in it. They're still, if you see the green and the blue, they're still thinking that solar and wind will make up a fair chunk of it. But they are assuming that natural gas, carbon capture, and CCUS stands for carbon capture and underground storage, will make up a chunk of our domestic power supply. There's also another assumption that's coming in. If you see now, domestic supply by 2050 will have phased out natural gas in it. They're starting in, well, pilot projects now in 2025, starting in 2030, to phase in hydrogen, biomethane in to do it. You'll also see, which is quite interesting, is National Grid expect there to be a lower demand for gas by 2050 as well. And that's because they don't expect all new homes to require gas in such the same way. They're expecting that basically, if you can see on the net zero one, on the, well, my right, the hydrogen boilers, and they're expecting a lot of district heating and electric pumps in new build developments to start occurring in the next 20 years. So the concept of everyone having their own boiler, they expect to be phased out. That may be a gross assumption, but that's what they're lobbying for, and that's how they feel it'll be more efficient in the future. At the moment, our domestic energy supply is a mixture of gas generation, and the hydrogen is made from blending and from electrolysis. And it's a kind of vicious circle, really and truthfully, is that from gas, they generate electricity. From electricity, you make electrolysis. From hydrogen, you make natural gas, and so on and so forth. So we need to break this cycle. It sounds almost like insane, to be honest, right? But you're converting energy form from one form to another form, and it's a lot of talk is the answer. There are some current projects in place now, and the way it's going to work and the way it's been tested is essentially it'll be phased in. And then if you imagine the pipeline supply here, which is normal National Grid domestic supply, they will blend natural gas with hydrogen. And throughout the country, they'll have deep blending facilities so that essentially those things like power stations, we can use pure 100% natural gas, they'll have it. Industrial places which need pure hydrogen get it. And like housing, local distribution networks and whatnot, will have a blended supply of it. There are projects in place right now that are doing things. Unfortunately, I've got your picture on my right-hand side of this, so I can't read with things, but the HYNET, which is in the Liverpool Bay Area, has started, and it's due to start operations in the next 5 years and full operations by the end of the decade. They are going to do hydrogen production, hydrogen generation. They're going to provide blended hydrogen to the local housing. They use hydrogen for trains and industrial area. And they're also going to do essentially carbon storage and carbon shipping as well. This bit up here with the future hydrogen sources is probably the most interesting thing. And I'll come to that in a bit more later, right? But it's not just there that they're doing in Liverpool Bay. In the Isle of Grain in London. Oh, sorry. I just In the Isle of Grain in London, there was a study to do it to also supply hydrogen to London and the south. This was due to actually report in about April time, but I suspect COVID has killed it because I have no idea what the report is. I think it will work favourably on it because the whole point of hydrogen is we can repurpose our existing infrastructure, we can supply it, and it's very easy to do. But if it doesn't work out there, I have no doubt there'll be somewhere else that can do it. And in TEESIDE and HUMBERSIDE, they now have a project which is due to start over the next couple of years. They're taking an old gas field here, the Endurance gas field, and they're going to do underground storage with it. But essentially, they're not there really actually doing it for domestic supply there, unfortunately. That's all for commercial and industrial supply. They're going to use hydrogen there to power places. So this is whilst it's in its infancy, this is not a like pie in the sky dream. This is something that is going to happen. It's going to come forward. As far as National Grid is concerned, we are going to use hydrogen in our domestic supplies. Why is the answer? Because the UK actually, believe it or not, has some of the best geology in the world. The whole southern gas basin is a fantastic area for storing CO2. There have already been a couple of fields approved by the government for gas storage, for CO2 storage. I suspect there'll be others as well along the way. The point I need to make here is, whilst we're great at it, and while we'd be best at it, and I hate to say it, commercially, so a lot of companies expecting countries throughout Europe to ship their stuff to us and we'll store it for them. This is not a long-term solution. By 2050, we wouldn't be doing this. So this will only be done for a while. Now, I actually spoke briefly with ABS. I should have put an extra slide in here. So if we could consider the two ones on the left-hand side, the very far left is methane reforming, which is what we're doing now to generate hydrogen. We take natural gas, we use power, and we generate hydrogen and CO2. What's in development now and has been used on pilot projects on the Brea field in the North Sea is that we're taking natural gas and we're generating graphene rather than CO2. The idea being it's a saleable product that we can use. The two ones on the right-hand side are what we're going to use going forward, and these are very much experimental at the moment. The UK is essentially, because of its expertise out of Aberdeen and its oil and gas industry up there, is developing these. And these take just water and split the atom, the H2O atom, to produce hydrogen and oxygen. And that is what the aim is for. So carbon capture and storage from natural gas is only expected to be there for the next 30 years. After that, it's expected the hydrogen will be generated without using methane. So essentially, yeah, there are two phases in it. The first phase, up to 2050, we use blue hydrogen. The second phase, we'll use green hydrogen. When we're using blue hydrogen, it will be blended in. A lot of existing boilers and domestic appliances will be okay up to a certain level. When we use green hydrogen, they will have to be replaced. There's a big difference in burning hydrogen and burning methane. So that's why it's akin now, I suppose, really, I just thought about it, to when we moved to digital TV and we had to go have set-top boxes and do things. So some boilers will have to be replaced, some will have to be converted. This is from Oil and Gas UK, which is essentially an industry body, which is showing what it's like. There are already pilot projects in the northern North Sea, just up here. And they're going to float floating wind farms out by the platforms. These wind farms essentially will not generate electricity. They will generate power, which we use to split water to generate hydrogen instead. The real truth behind that, and one of the few parts that makes it more valuable, is that hydrogen is easier to store and easier to transport than electricity. So you don't need any battery technology, anything like that. We already have gas storage facilities. So it's a no-brainer for as far as I'm concerned. There's no need to convert a lot of houses. Yes, there'll be some boiler conversions, but using hydrogen is far and away. So it is essentially deemed that by 2050, a lot of oil fields will have gone into decommissioning by then, but the infrastructure will be repurposed as offshore wind farms, floating ones, not fixed ones on the ground. These would be too far offshore to see. I brought this in not to sort of say how fantastic the UK is really more than anything else, because yes, it's done very well. Don't get me wrong. It has reduced its CO2 emissions drastically, more than any other nation in the world. But it's really reduced it simply because we've stopped using coal. This black line here, you can almost see the reductions in carbon emissions with the reduction in coal. The blue line is gas. And that's why it's seen that the next stage to move us to net zero is to reduce our reliance on gas. We are seen quite widely around the world as one of the leaders in this technology and the way of doing it. So you kind of need to make sure we do go to net zero if we want to market ourselves as it. So I'll just summarize this now, and I hope I haven't taken too long. I may have gone a bit too fast. The UK is moving to hydrogen as a domestic heating source. There are pilot projects underway right now, and they are going to be a blended supply of up to 40% hydrogen. Up to 40% hydrogen will be no need for domestic people to do anything. Existing boilers will work, there'll be no problem with it. It's very unlikely anyone will have a problem. Beyond that, there will be a need for conversion or replacement of boilers. And I believe now, I checked with Worcester Bosch, I think they were, and they make hydrogen ready boilers already now. So their boilers that are being installed are hydrogen ready. Hydrogen is cheaper to store than electricity, and so we can use a lot of existing infrastructure. There's no need to redo a lot of stuff on it. And national grid will have to be upgraded though in places. There will be, and there in fact is a massive program on now. Hydrogen doesn't work very well in the old Victorian cast iron pipes. So a lot of pipes are around, and I believe even for those who live near South Wimbledon suffer from this recently. Hydrogen reacts with cast iron pipes that are stored in water, saturated water. So there's a massive program on the national grid now to replace all the pipes and all the valves with PVC things. The interesting thing that is happening is that there's also a firm belief within the industry that hydrogen will be taking the lead on for vehicles rather than electricity. It's because hydrogen fuel cells can be refilled in about 5 minutes. And there's no need for houses to have individual charging points and those things. Now, again, the Chinese are at the head of the game on that in developing hydrogen fuel cells. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if in 20 years' time, hydrogen-powered vehicles are going to take a priority over electricity, simply because people wouldn't have to change their living habits. You would fill up at a petrol station just the same as you would do now. Cynically, and obviously I do work in the oil and gas industry, the UK, with its geology and the fact that we have marketed and developed most of this technology, is trying to sell itself around the world as a leader in hydrogen production and carbon capture and storage. So it's estimated this could be worth 200 or 300 billion to the UK economy in 2 decades' time. So yes, the energy industry itself has got a vested interest in this. And thank you very much. I may have gone fast, but I hope that wasn't too bad for you.